Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Church in the Valley podcast. We're so glad that you decided to tune in. And if you guys haven't heard our previous episodes, don't forget to check those out. So today we're here with our friend, Pastor Grant. He works here at CIV. So what is it that you do here at CIV, Pastor Grant? Why don't you tell us?
Well, I'm still sorting a lot of that out right now. For many years, I was working as the youth pastor for the church. But last year, Pastor Nim asked me to kind of take on some new responsibilities, kind of help with our whole digital technology aspect of our live streaming, our audio, video production, all this kind of stuff. CIV is a really awesome church. We have like cutting edge equipment, but we're starting to get a little bit behind, and so we were trying to bring things back, to being that cutting edge church again. So yeah, that's kind of my role right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's really good, because I think also as a church that's so big and current, what's going on in the world, like technology and all that type of stuff is like a fast-paced thing. So to get on that is always nice, and to have someone full-time, I appreciate that. Well, we appreciate that as a church.
Oh, thank you.
So yeah. So on the topic of faith journeys, we're just going to dive into what brought you to where you are right now.
Oh my.
Yeah. So why don't you tell us, how did you get into? Yeah, how'd you get here?
How did I get here? Yeah. How far back in time do you want to go? I was baptized as a young adult. I was 18. Mm-hmm. My mother was a Seventh-day Adventist, but when she was a young adult, she got married. She married a non-Christian, and so we rarely went to church. It was kind of a sore spot with my dad, So on top of that, we often lived in tiny little rural communities in Alberta where there was like no church for like 100 miles in any direction kind of thing. So I grew up aware of what Seventh-day Adventism was, but didn't really practice it, didn't really do anything. But when I turned 18 and I went off to college, that was my rebellious stage. Some teens, will start dating, or they'll start living the wild life. I started going to church because I was like, now my dad can't tell me what I can and cannot do anymore. So yeah, I was going to church. I was in Calgary at the time, and that's when I was baptized. But beyond that, it's been a long journey, because even as a young adult baptized, I think I was 18 at the time, I would have to describe my faith as purely intellectual. Okay. In other words, I knew up here what Jesus had done for me on the cross, but it hadn't really moved to here yet. Right? And so I was studying electronics engineering at the time. In Calgary, I dropped out after a year and a half. I knew it wasn't what I wanted to do with my life. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I was a dropout for about another year and a half after that. And so 3 years after graduating high school, I sensed this overwhelming call from God to go into ministry. And so in faith, I went to what's now Burman University. Back then it was Canadian Union College. and enrolled in there. But the ironic thing is, even going through all these classes, my faith was still very, very intellectual, right? And in fact, it wasn't until my very first year of ministry, I was pastoring a tiny little church up in northern Alberta, and driving into town one day, I had a Christian rock album on, and I was listening to this song, and it was talking about how, the author was describing being caught in a summer rainstorm, right? And he was kind of making this comparison about how the rain's pouring over him, and that's how God's love pours out over us, right? And in that moment, for the first time in my life, the immensity, the enormity of what God had done for me on the cross just hit me right here. And I started bawling my eyes out. I mean, I literally had to pull my car over to the side of the road under the shoulder because I was going to have an accident. I was like, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see out the windshield because my eyes were just like so full of tears. but that was the beginning of my, I guess for me, even though I was already baptized and I was already a pastor, that was the start of my real faith relationship with Jesus.
Right.
Because it was in that moment that that my faith moved from my head into my heart. And I began to live out of a love experience with Jesus rather than just an intellectual, like I know he died for me on the cross kind of thing. So after that, pastored a number of churches around Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and in 2018, I think it was, I ended up here at Church in the Valley at the request of Pastor Dave Jameson.
Nice.
Yeah.
Wow. It's quite the journey, hey?
It's a long journey. It's been, what year are we in now? It'll be 30 years this fall.
Wow.
30 years this fall, yeah.
That is dedication.
Yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. I think like it's super encouraging to hear because even from my faith journey, like when I was baptized, I really thought that it would be this ultimate experience as soon as I got out of the water. But hearing that it took you that much time, and even after you were called to ministry, that's when you had that. What's that word?
Revelation.
There's something. There's an epiphany.
Yeah.
That's the word.
That's a good word.
Yeah, I had an epiphany on what Jesus really did for you, and all of those things. It's really encouraging to hear that it doesn't happen right away.
No, it doesn't.
And it doesn't.
For me, it was 8 years.
Yeah,
8 years from the time I was baptized to the time I had that awakening within my heart.
Yeah. So that's cool.
Yeah. If you don't mind me asking though, how did you get to that point? Because I mean, there's probably people out there who also struggle with that. Like, you know it, and you're like, okay, but how do you feel it? Like, how did you get to that point? You were like, dang, okay, like, this is real.
Yeah, I mean, I can share what my own experience was, and like it was, like I said, it was the power of a song that came over me. But I mean, how to describe it to someone who is finding that lacking in their life, and how to move to that point, that's a hard one. I mean, for me, I guess, you know, in my head I always knew what Jesus had done for me, but I guess, you know, that for me, that's one of the powerful things about music, and why I'm such a lover of worship music. Is because music has the ability to bypass your brain, right? I've heard some well-meaning Christians say, "Well, see, that's why you got to be careful what you listen to," and that's true to an extent. But you know, when you immerse yourself in music that reflects God's character and reflects His love, music does have that ability to kind of almost go through the back door of your brain, like, you know, whatever intellectual barriers you put up,
right?
It sometimes somehow sneaks in through the back door and catches you off guard, right? And that's exactly what happened to me in that moment. Is my intellectual defenses were down, just kind of listening to this song, and it, you know, the immensity of the message just hit me like a ton of bricks in that moment, right? So. For me, it was always through music, and I've always loved and appreciated Christian music even before that time, but even more so afterwards. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, very fitting.
Yeah.
Since our last episode was with Jolly, so.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Or 2 episodes ago, it was with Jolly. My timeline's messed up.
It seems to be a pattern, obviously.
Yeah,
even for us, to, like for me at least, like music is really. Now that you're saying, like, it bypasses that like barrier that we have, so maybe we'll have to do a deep dive
with
into
everybody else. Yeah. I was just thinking about this analogy. I don't know. I just learned how to drive standard, not very well. Like manual. I just learned how to
my
drive
parents
manual.
made me do that. So
there you go.
I've been doing it since 14.
Rural.
I was like, you're from
that like makes sense, right? Yeah. But I was thinking like, when I was learning how to do it, I would ask, well, when do I switch? Like, when do I switch gears?
Yep.
And they were like, well, it's a feeling.
Yep. Well, you feel it in the engine. You feel it.
It's just a feeling
in the sound of the engine. And
I was like, I don't know how to feel that unless you experience it.
Yeah.
So I guess for those kind of things, it's a feeling. You have to experience how to do it. But to change gears, we're talking manual. You like that?
That's a good segue.
That's a good segue.
That's a really good segue.
And to change gears on technology and your ministry in technology, where did that get started? Did it start like right away in your ministry? Where did the passion for technology ministries come up in your faith journey?
Wow. It started off fairly quickly, I guess. The very first church I pastored in northern Alberta, they were just bringing on a brand new technology. You may have heard about it. They were doing satellite evangelism back in those days. They called it Net 95 and Net 96 and all these kind of things, where they would try to do public evangelism, by bringing in big name speakers like Dwight Nelson or Mark Finley or whatever, but you can't bring big guys like that to tiny little rural churches, and so. We heard about this whole project, and I had 30 people in my church. It's a 30-member church. Wow. It was that tiny, yeah. Wow. 30 people, and right in the middle of nowhere. We're an hour from the nearest town, and so I just kind of presented this whole idea, like this is something we should look at, and it was funny because there's a bunch of old farmers, like they're in their like 60s, 70s, and like. Yeah, let's try this. So we contacted a satellite company and we had them come and install all this technology in this tiny little rural church. I have to say from an evangelism point of view, it didn't really work out that great, only because, like I said, we're in the middle of nowhere, right? Yeah. So like we're inviting all these farmers and things that are in the community, but we only had like a couple of people show up. But that would have been the first time that we tried using technology in church ministries, and for me, when I went away to seminary at Andrews University, where I really started to get into technology was in music. All students at seminary, you're required to do some volunteer hours. Like you can't just go to seminary and like just bury your nose in the books. You're required to like find a church somewhere in the area, get engaged with that church, and actually stay active in ministry during the time that you're at school. Well, I ended up volunteering at Pioneer Memorial Church, which is like the biggest church in the area. It's like the campus church. But I went in a different direction because I was deeply passionate about youth ministries at the time, and I signed up to work with the early teens. Now, to give you an idea, at Pioneer, the early teen class, like 13 and 14-year-olds, there's 80 kids.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, I know. It's like that was bigger than 2 of my previous churches put together, right? And so all of a sudden I'm working with all these teenagers, and I quickly found out that the quickest way to engage with them was through music. We would, funny thing, like it was like literally a couple of weeks into this whole ministry, I wasn't getting very far. Like I would come in, I'd try to teach a Sabbath school lesson, and the kids are just sitting there, just deadpan, just looking at me, and no real engagement, no real discussion, kind of thing, right? A couple of weeks into this, backstory though. One of the other Sabbath school leaders knew that I played acoustic guitar, so it's like, hey, bring your guitar, can you do a couple of songs before Sabbath school, kind of thing, right? And I would, and not a lot of kids were singing. Again, it's like just sitting there, just staring at you, this cold expression. Yeah, it's intimidating, man.
No, they're scary. I'm not scared of them, but they're scary.
They're intimidating, yeah. They're very intimidating. So, anyways, a couple weeks into this one 13-year-old boy, his name was John, comes up to me after Sabbath school and says, "Do you think you could teach me some guitar chords?" Right? He had this like cheap $70 used electric guitar that a friend of his had sold him. He had aspirations to be a rock musician. That was his goal in life. He wanted to be a rock star, but didn't have a clue how to play guitar. Right? So like, hey, can we jam? Right? So I said, yeah, let's hang out next Sabbath afternoon. Don't say anyone. We cut out of worship. We skipped worship, and we stayed in the Sabbath school room while everyone else went away, to the sanctuary for worship, and we just hung out and did a bunch of guitar playing. That went on for a couple weeks until one of his friends found out about it and wanted to join. And then 2 more of their friends found out about it. And literally in a month and a half, we had this whole praise team going on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it kept growing from there. And then we had some other kids that showed up like, we don't play instruments, but we'd love to like, mix sound for you kind of thing. And so like in about 2 or 3 months, we had a praise team of like about 9 kids,
Wow.
9 teenagers. And when I saw the impact and the power of that, I said, I gotta invest in this more. Fast forward a few years, by the year 2005, 2006, I probably had I had about $36,000 worth of sound equipment, musical instruments. It was just something I invested in because it was such a powerful way to connect kids into the church and to connect them with God. And so for me, that was something that was worth investing in. And again, it was a natural outflow of my, I guess, love of technology. So yeah, just combining worship music and tech with the kids and finding ways to keep them engaged with the church and engaged with God.
Awesome.
So yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, wow. That's so funny that you, like, rebellious gave some kid a lesson.
Yeah.
But then it turned into, like, such an impactful thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like, who taught you how to beat a Ross star? Oh, my pastor.
Yeah.
My pastor taught me how to do it.
Well, I mean, I through Facebook, I've actually stayed in touch with a lot of these kids over the years. I mean, they're all adults now; they all got kids of their own now. But yeah, I mean, John went on years after I left. Went on to be a camp counselor at summer camp,
Oh, wow.
and he's still actively engaged in his church to this day. In fact, most of the kids that I knew back then still are. So something was working back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's very true. Music is very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
And I think technology intertwines now with that, with the day and age that we're going in.
Well, the kids are so in tune to that, right? I mean, back when I was a kid, the joke always was in that time that if you can't program your VCR, ask your 12-year-old kid to do it, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean, for adults, the whole thing of like having a VCR in your living room, like how do I set this thing to like record my favorite program?
Yeah.
Like it was confusing to them, right? But
Yeah.
kids, they just gravitate to
just
it
pick
and they
up
figure
on
it out.
very fast. Yeah. So, a question for you though, going back to the story you just told us, how was your relationship compared to how it first was in the beginning to it is now, and like the ministry that you've done, all that? How did they come together to make the person that you are now?
My relationship with the kids?
No, with God. Sorry.
With God, sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
Clarify.
How is my relationship with God
Jesus.
different now than it was back then?
Yeah.
Like any relationship, it deepens over time. I mean, it's like a human relationship, right? You get out of it what you put into it, right? Like, I mean, I've had friends that I went to high school with, friends I went to college with. Their marriages have fallen apart. And I'm not trying to be critical. I'm not trying to say that they didn't try, because I mean, in any relationship, it takes two to make it work, right? I mean, if one partner's committed and the other's not, it'll probably still fall apart, kind of thing, right? But the overarching theme here is that in a relationship, whether with a marriage or a boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, you get out of it what you put into it. It doesn't just happen. You don't just say, hey, let's hang out and have a good time, and things are going to just magically, coalesce. And so, with my relationship with God, it's deepened. But I guess the downside is sometimes that deepening comes through really hard times, right? Like, I've always been kind of a cutting edge, kind of always pushing the envelope a little bit kind of guy. Right? And I've had to pastor some very, very conservative churches where what I do is not recognized or not appreciated. In fact, I literally had one church member literally come up to me right after a worship program for the kids, for the teenagers, And she looked me in the eye and said, "You're leading our young people straight to hell."
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it's in moments like that where you just want to just quit. It's like,
Yeah.
why am I putting up with this? I would have more fun working at McDonald's flipping burgers than have to put up with this kind of stuff, right? But in those hard times too, though, that's where you really start to lean on him even harder, right? And so, I mean, we always wish that it's always going to be smooth sailing, right? You always wish that the relationship with your experience with God is always going to be just perfect. It's always going to be blue skies and sunny days, but it's in the hard times where you actually start to grow, and that's where you start to realize how He's leading you through those tough times. So yeah.
That's cool. Well, I would love to draw more on what you just said about how in some churches what you do is not even recognized. I know the church that I come from, back in the day, it used to just be like a soundboard, 2 mics, and that was it. And that's all you needed. If you needed a sound or if you needed something, you just plug in your phone, or they had a CD player and you would play a CD.
Yep.
So I guess in comparison to what we do here at CIV, why is it so important that we're investing so much into that aspect of the church? And why is it so important here at CIV, the way that you have guided things in the past couple of years that you've been here?
For me, one of the ironic things about working with technology in a church is you almost want it to be invisible. In which you want people to come in and worship and not even realize what's all actually going on behind the scenes, right? And so, when the sound person is running, they're mixing the praise team and the pastor is preaching, it should almost be transparent, where you don't even realize that the sound is being amplified. You don't realize that things are blending a certain way. And when you eliminate all those distractions, that's when people are free to just be in the moment of worship, right? Because I mean, if you're thinking about, pastor's got a really good message, but there's this annoying hum in the system, or I'm hearing this reverberating echo, and all of a sudden you're distracted, right? And so you don't want to have those kind of distractions showing up in worship. But I mean, what I'm finding more and more important for a church like Church in the Valley is the number of people who are worshiping online now. Before COVID hit, we probably had about 50 people every week joining us online. When all the churches began to shut down during COVID, a lot of churches were not ready for that. Right? They were totally caught unaware. And it's like, okay, how do we transition into this new model of trying to reach people, online? But of course, we had already been doing it, and we were ready to go. And literally overnight, our attendance skyrocketed to around 400 or 500 people every week.
Wow.
Yeah, which was great. But for us, the real shock came after the COVID restrictions began to relax, and people started coming back to church. But ironically, the live stream numbers continued to stay high, right? In other words, we'd somehow gained a following of people who were really engaged with Church in the Valley. And even though people were free to actually go into physical churches now, we were still getting hundreds of people every week. Yeah. And then even not in a live experience, but like tuning in and watching the sermon or the worship later on, like on a Sabbath afternoon or even on a Sunday or Monday or something like that. Yeah. Within the span of a week, we'd have hundreds and hundreds of views of people who are checking us out and engaging with us online that way. And so it really becomes important to try and find ways to interact with people in that way, right? Because I mean, if you got 500 people online, that's almost double of what we have here in attendance at Church in the Valley.
Yeah.
Right. So it's almost like having two churches. We have our live people who come here and they sit in the chairs and they worship and they participate, but we have another entire church, almost the exact same size, that's out there, scattered all over the world, but they're still a part of this community. Yeah. Right. And so that becomes something that's really critical. For a lot of churches, I think when during the time of COVID, they probably envision the idea that at some point we're just going to get back to regular church and we can just dump all this stuff.
Yeah.
Right. But no, this is where a lot of people are. And I've heard a lot of positive and negative. I've heard people say, well, you can't really be engaged in a church if you're just sitting at home in your pajamas watching on a TV or on a laptop or on a tablet or something like that. And I agree with them to a degree that there's something special that happens in real interactive worship at church. But what I've discovered is we don't get to choose where people are. All we can do is minister to them wherever they are. Right? We can't say, hey, you need to be in a church. If they're not going to come to church, then we need to go find them.
Right.
It's not about saying, hey, you need to come to us. We're going to try and find you, and find ways to engage with you. Right. So for me, that's something really, really critical as a church, that we always stay and find ways to be more engaged. And it's something that we're actually looking into. We're actually trying to find ways to be more interactive with our online audience. We don't want them to just be consumers. We don't want them just to sit there and watch like they're watching their favorite, sitcom or reality TV show or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're exploring new ways to actually engage with them, talk with them, interact with them while they're online. So
yeah, I will say
that's the next step.
I was one of those people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, during COVID, because my church closed down and they weren't ready.
Yeah.
So they didn't have any services for maybe a month.
Yeah.
So I would watch Church in the Valley every week, and
you were the
honestly,
400?
that's probably one of the reasons why I decided to come here to Lower Mainland.
Wow.
So
that's insane.
thank you for your ministry.
Yeah, and I think it's something sometimes, it gets overlooked, like you said, sometimes you have to be so quiet in that way, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes, for some of us who are singing on stage, there's you and Stefan who are behind the booth and running all those technical things, and I think we forget that, in order for us to even turn on the lights, we need all of that, to go down, and we need also the program that you're doing at one point with the younger kids and having to see, younger kids wanting to be involved in that is also so cool too, because to also lead that younger generation, not only the ones that want to play the instruments, but the ones that want to be, flipping the switches and whatnot. I don't even know what goes behind there. I just know there's a lot of buttons. I don't even know.
No, it's really cool. We have a number of teenagers and even younger. I've got younger kids as young as 11 and 12 coming up to me saying, "Can I be on the team?" kind of thing. Right? It's well, okay, we'll see what we can do. Yeah, I mean, I'm totally comfortable with teenagers. I'm a little out of my element when it comes to younger kids, but yeah, no, it's really cool because we have such a multi-generational team. I mean, we have young teenagers, 13, 14-year-old kids on our tech team, all the way up to retirees, right? You know, who are
right. Yeah.
Yeah. And what's really cool is they all seem to work together.
Yeah, no, it's really nice too. And I'm very thankful every time I get off that stage because I'm it's a team effort.
It is.
Even though I get that there's people who like to be behind the scenes, but they deserve the recognition. So don't forget about those ones. They're pushing the buttons,
Yeah. I will say too, many a time I've gone to a church and feedback or slides messing up or the pastor asking for the clicker and the clicker not working, all of those technical aspects have kind of not ruined the worship experience, but have made their way into the worship experience. And now that when I think about going to church, sometimes I'm thinking about, maybe something is going to go wrong, maybe there's going to be feedback, and that kind of limits how much I'm able to invest in the worship experience at that given church. So what you say about being invisible is so applicable, because I just know I've gone to church and there's been a technical malfunction somewhere, and that's all that we talk about. Yeah. That's all we think about. Oh, do you remember when that feedback happened? Or do you remember when that it didn't work out? So what you guys do is, I feel like you guys also get really under recognized and what's the word?
Appreciated?
Underappreciated. There you go. So it's really important work that you guys do. So I think this also this opportunity for us to talk about it and
Sure.
talk about behind the scenes is super important as well.
Well, one of the things I love about working at Church in the Valley, and this goes beyond the technology and beyond the youth ministry, and it just something that permeates everything that's done here at this church. And I first began to learn this from Pastor Dave when he was the senior pastor here, and that's simply to have a spirit of excellence. Like whatever we do, let's do our absolute best, right? And I know Jolly's been working with the praise team to develop that kind of a culture. You know, we give our absolute best, and it's the same thing with the tech team as well. You know, when we're setting things up, when we're trying to get ready for a worship service, you know, we're going through all sorts of checklists, right? Has this been checked? Has this been checked? Is this working, right? Because that's exactly the thing. We don't want those kind of things to just pop up, right? And so, I mean, you know, for us here at CIV, worship starts at 10 a.m. But I'm usually here at 7:30.
Right.
Right. So 2.5 hours, I'm here early, and it's not that it takes me that long to get ready. It's that I've learned that things can go wrong, and they will go wrong.
Yeah.
Right. And so for me, it's that I have that buffer of time. Like, okay, one of the video cameras isn't working, or one of the projector screens isn't working. Right. It's like, and so I have that time now to figure it out. Let's make sure this is up and running. Make sure everything's excellent before the worship comes. But when those people walk in through into the auditorium doors, they need to experience excellence.
Right.
Right. Excellence from the praise team. Excellence from the tech team, excellence from the pastors who are preaching. We want them to have a great A experience. So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful too. And also I think for people who are in different parts of the world watching us, just to think about that is like insane that we can reach those people as well.
Yes.
Not like that work that you do even coming 7 a.m, not only for us here physically, but like for the people online. So yeah, wow. So with that being said, then do you have any goals for like, or maybe, anything you foresee in the future? You want like dreams?
Goals for where we are right now for tech. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Because like the whole like live stream thing is probably something for us that came up so abruptly, right? And we just had to work with what we got.
Yeah. I mean, if there's any listeners on this podcast that want to donate, $250,000 or something like that.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not cheap stuff.
We could do so much, man. Yeah, we are in the need of upgrading a lot of our equipment. The church facility is almost 10 years old now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it was almost 10 years ago that CIV opened, right?
Wow.
9.5 or something like that. Anyways, so yeah, a lot of equipment starting to wear out. You know, we've had to send a number of our spotlights and things out for repairs this last 6 months. We had I think 6 lights fail on us, and video projectors are getting old, and we just upgraded our sound system.
Yay.
Just this last fall with a amazing mixer. I mean, I can hear the difference between the old system and the new one. It's like it is so crystal clear. I've never heard the praise team sound so good as when we got this new mixer.
There you go.
We sound good now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, all this stuff costs money, and it's like when you buy a computer for yourself, or you buy yourself a laptop or something like that, it's not going to last forever.
Oh yeah.
Right. In 5-6 years you're going to need another one.
Yeah, and I'm saving up for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so we're in that position right now where we're needing to do some serious upgrading, but need to find some generous donors who can help us with that one.
True. Yeah. No, that's very true, because we don't think about how expensive those things are.
Expensive.
And now that you realize it, now that I'm realizing it, that you said 10 years ago, I've only had my phone for like a year and something, and I already need a new battery. Like, yeah, things do.
And not only just replacing old and dying equipment. I mean, I would love to be able to add more cameras so we can get more views, and put some cameras on stage. Drum cam, keyboard cam.
Oh, nice.
That'd be cool.
From every angle.
Yeah.
Yeah, get all the different.
You heard it here first, viewers. If you want to donate, you can donate to the podcast and to the media visual
go.
team, so the AV
Yeah.
team. So there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I will ask this question as well.
Okay.
If you, if there are people out there who are wanting to start in this ministry or wanting to grow their technology AV ministry within their own churches, what would you say to them to get them started or to get them off on the right foot?
That's a good question. I mean, you can only do what you can afford, right?
Right.
And I totally get it. A lot of churches are they're not awash in cash. They don't have a lot of resources. They don't have a lot of donors. And the honest, hard truth is that technology does cost a lot of money. But I guess the best advice I can give is you just do whatever you're capable of doing, right? I mean, even if it means getting your iPhone out and putting it on a little tripod and trying to live stream your sermon and your worship service onto Facebook or something like that. It's not going to be at the same level, but the idea is getting the word out there and finding those people who are online who will connect with your church in that way. Right? You don't have to have a multi-million-dollar budget to do it. I mean, yeah, it looks great, sounds great, but start with whatever you can afford. I mentioned earlier when I was doing music ministry with teenagers, that I had invested around $36,000 worth of sound equipment and instruments. That was something I personally invested in because at the time the church I was in was fairly conservative. They wanted their young people to be engaged, but they didn't want them engaged that way. Right? They weren't so convinced that modern praise and worship was the way to go. So, I mean, I could have gone to the board and say, hey, can I have some money to get some sound equipment and some instruments? They would all said no, right? So what do? Well, I can spare a little bit here. I mean, I didn't buy $36,000 overnight. And this is spread out over 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Buy a microphone here, buy a guitar here, buy a bass guitar here, and little by little, it just kind of grows and adds up. But I mean, so start off with whatever you can afford, and grow it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that spirit of excellence you were talking about earlier also applies to anyone's situation wherever they're at. To just use what they have.
Yep.
Be as excellent as they can be.
Yeah.
With the resources that they have.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, excellence is more of an attitude than the kind of equipment that you have.
Right.
Yeah. It's just do your best.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think God, even along the way, provides for those things and those aspects too. Like, we never know. Because, yeah.
Absolutely.
It's even this podcast is like, who even knew we'd be doing this? And reaching those people as well, through conversation. So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice you'd give to your younger self? Now knowing where you've gone through and everything that you've...
It's always a tough question.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
It's always a tough
love
one we
seeing
ask.
people, their thinking process, too.
Yeah.
Probably going back into your life like, what would I tell my little me?
I guess the best advice I could give myself, my younger self, would be to believe in the ministry you're doing. Do your best to ignore the naysayers and the detractors and the ones that say can't be done, and the ones who say, hey, this ministry is leading young people to hell.
Yeah.
To be able to move past that and to recognize God's calling for what it is. Because what's ironic is in those moments, God always comes to us with a still small voice. But the voice of the critic always sounds so much louder, right? And if we can somehow learn to hear his voice more clearly than the critics and the detractors and the people, the haters, to be able to just stay, God told me this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and stick with it.
Yeah.
And because when you know what God's called you to do, I don't really care what you think about my ministry, right? Because I'm following God,
Right.
I'm answering to God. I'm not answering to you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That's good. Yeah, block out the haters. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's good. Wow. That's amazing how, like, technology and also what you've gone through, like, the small churches that you've been through now to here, and how you can also, you started off with the little satellite dish in this little church, and here we are, like, 600 people sometimes.
Yeah.
So that's, wow. It's quite the journey.
It is a journey, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So is there any advice you'd like to give to anybody maybe out there that's, I don't know, they want...
Pause.
Sorry, I'm trying to think what...
No, that's good.
No,
I just asked that question.
Yeah, I know you did. I'm so sorry.
This is part of the blooper reel.
No, but we're keeping it real, keeping it real.
We've never done this before.
Sorry. But I think any advice, like, do you anything for us, like, that you see that you'd like to see?
The only advice I'd give, you as a team here at Church in the Valley is the same advice I would want to give my younger self, is believe in the ministry that God's called you to do.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to be a critic.
Right.
Right. It's easy to say that won't work. It's easy to say that it costs too much. It's easy to say that you're wasting your time. But when you believe that God's given you a vision and a purpose of what He wants you to do with your life, the hardest thing is to stick to that and to fully believe in that and to follow through on that.
Right.
Right. And so, that would be the advice I'd give you as a worship leader and as a podcast director here, and is God's called you to a special ministry, and hang on to that.
Yeah.
Hang on to that, even when people do criticize.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's hard. I think it's hard even to, like, I know there's a different take that at least me, when we're on the stage, we're like, oh my goodness, like, I'm going to look silly, or, people with my jewelry and whatnot, always those things that come into my head. But, like, to always remind myself, like, it's between me and God no matter what. So it's easy to get wrapped up into that negative, like,
Sure.
feedback. But to always remind myself, which is very assuring to hear from someone who's, like, older than me too, and a pastor to hear, you're like, you get those
Sure.
doubts.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I appreciate that. So thank you. Sorry, that didn't mean to be like, I wasn't gonna ask the same question. I was trying to transition to something else. But yeah, well, thanks for sharing.
Thank you for having me.
There's also a lot we can learn from even me sitting here and having these conversations with each person that we had, like, learning something new and gaining insight about what it is you guys really do here at Church in the Valley, because not only just, like, Saturday comes and it's just one thing that we do. You guys are always working behind the scenes, like,
Yes.
Monday to Friday. Monday to Saturday, sorry, because Saturday is also the work day too.
It is, yeah.
But we appreciate everything that you do. And also for the people out there, don't forget that there's always the tech guys in the back, putting on the productions so that we can all come together and experience God in a different way and in a beautiful way at the end of the day.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And if we could finish on one last question.
Sure.
You say you're coming up on your 30th year of ministry, which is amazing. Congratulations. That's awesome. And as we've been hearing your story, you've been talking about all the hardships and challenges that you've gone through. What has kept you in the ministry this long? Not to say, like, not in a bad way, but
No, it's true. I mean, I've talked to other pastors, and it's a common theme, because when you're a pastor, you will never please everyone, right? I mean, for every compliment you get, there's 2 people criticizing, right? And so you have to either develop a thick skin to that, or you end up washing out. But somehow, and this is something I experienced very, very early on when I was first baptized and I first started following Jesus, is anytime I felt like I was drifting or falling away from my Christian experience or falling away from what God had called me to do. Or anytime I felt like throwing in the towel, like this is just, it's not worth it kind of thing. God would always send some tiny little reminder of just saying, hey, look what just happened last week. You know, like this young person just, you know, made a choice to be baptized, or this other person who was critical of you for years has apologized, or something like that. There's always some little thing that God will bring to my memory, and he'll just say, look, you're not in this alone, and the negative things are not as bad as you think they are, right? And he'll always bring something to my mind just to kind of cheer me up and bring me back. And that's something I've really, really found, I guess, true about God's faithfulness, right? He never leaves me in those dark shadows for very long. He'll always do something to remind me of his goodness.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. Yeah. It's hard also to be vulnerable, so I appreciate that. So thank you. And yeah, we're glad that you've decided to sit down and sit in this couch with us.
Thank you for being here.
me.
Yeah. And thank you for all the work that you've done here at CIV.
Yes.
You've not only I'm this is me saying thank you, not on behalf of everybody, but thank you for all that you do.
You're welcome.
So yeah, so if you heard it here, there's a lot that makes CIV, and if you want to know more about us, don't forget to like and subscribe to keep updated as well.
Turn on
there's also
notifications.
Notification. Hit that bell. Smash that bell.
Okay.
But also we have our socials as well to stay in touch with everything that we do here. And we're so excited to grow not only here, but on the whole social media platform and the internet. So, yeah, don't forget to love God.
Love people.
And serve the world.
There you go.
Bye.
See you later.